פרק שישי. דרך בריאתו של האדם, להיות נמשך בדעותו ובמעשו, אחר רעהו וחברו. It is the nature of human beings to be influenced by the behavior. Deot refers to in his behavior, in his midot, uv'ma'asao, and his actions. Ahar re'o v'havero. A normal person, all human beings essentially, with few exceptions, are influenced by their surroundings, their social context, by their friends, their neighbors, their associates. And we see this all the time, that people were once in a certain kind of person, and then as a result of interacting with a certain crowd, a certain type of person, we see over time their behavior in many areas changes for the worse. And this is because it is part of the human psyche, and it is a natural, almost inevitable aspect of the human being, that he is influenced by what goes on around him and wishes to fit in. So Rambam says again, Deot nimshach b'de'oto v'ma'aso ahar re'o v'havero, to be influenced in his actions, in his behavior, and as we will see also in the way he thinks, his opinions, to be influenced by others, and to act as the people of his city, his locality, as they behave, so does he. When in Rome, do as the Romans do. That is not only advice, it's also a fact. That's what people tend to do. Rambam discusses in Moreh Nevuchim, Perek Gimel, Perek Kaf Zayin, that one major aspect of the Torah, one of its main aims, is to create a reality, a community, a society in which people will absorb and will be influenced by the positive, not by the negative. Therefore, Rambam continues. He says, "Lefichach tzarich adam lehithaber l'sadiqim v'leshev etzel hachachamim tamid." And therefore, a person should strive always to associate with tzadiqim, with the righteous. That is to say, people who truly live according to the Torah, people who are truly committed to the Torah. V'leshev etzel hachachamim tamid. And to be in the company of and learn from Hachamim, people who are known to be true Talmidei Hachamim, scholars of the Torah, not only to learn the Torah, the specific teachings or halachot or explanations that he may hear from them, which is of course part of what we are discussing, but here we're focusing more on learning from their actions, from their behavior, from their midot, their speech, their dress even, and to distance oneself as much as possible from those who are divorced from the Torah, essentially, as Rambam describes them, ha'olachim v'choshech, those who walk in darkness. In order not to learn from how they behave and how they live their lives, because it is likely that he will be influenced. One could, of course, mention the Pesukim. Let me call it up on the screen a moment. In the very beginning of Sefer Tehillim, you should be able to see Tehillim Perek Aleph. Ashrei ha'ish asher lo halach ba'asat rashaim. How fortunate and how blessed is he who does not follow the ways of and live according to the suggestions of the rashaim, the evil, that is to say, people who are not really connected to the Torah. He does not literally stand or allow himself to be or to follow the ways of the sinners, and not even to sit in a place of empty frivolity and worthless talk or ideas. Rather, he always strives to be connected to the Torah, and this, as we're about to see now, is not only a function of studying Torah. It is also a function of how one conducts one's social affairs, contacts. Rambam continues. He who literally walks with the Hachamim will become wiser. And he who spends his time with the foolish, with the empty-headed, he will also be negatively impacted by this. As we just saw.
Rabbi?
Yes.
I mean, there seem to be so many examples of religious Jews who have been very damaged by not following this advice. I'm also specifically referring to very intellectual types that have been associated with the elites, such as certain well-known religious judges who are actually, some of them are truly religious, but have been associating with certain elites for a very long time and seem to have been influenced.
Let me relate to you briefly a conversation that I had many years ago. I remember this conversation took place. We were sitting in a certain spot in the Ir HaAtika in Yerushalayim. A conversation I had with Professor Hillel Weiss. Professor Hillel Weiss is a very religious and right-wing, ideologically speaking, individual, very ideologically very, very healthy and robust, shall we say. And he's part of the academic world. His field is Hebrew literature. He said to me that you know as well as I that there are many people who wear a kippah and keep all or many of the mitzvot, but really they are meshumadim. And he went on to explain. He says, not necessarily in actions that one can point to, But in terms of their thinking, in terms of their opinions, their value system, they become Meshumadim. That is to say, they quickly learn that in order to advance in their field, particularly the academic world he was referring to, you have to fit in, you have to adopt certain views, and you will suffer if you do not do so. And he said, I've seen many people who, 20, 30 years ago, their opinions were what you would call, I suppose, generally much more right-wing, much more ideologically committed. And over time, this point of view is constantly being whittled away at until eventually they think like others. They are most definitely affected by the people with whom they have to rub shoulders, the people who have some influence of their career trajectory and other aspects of their lives. They are constantly bombarded by all kinds of views and ideas on the news, newspapers, and because those who oppose the Torah, at least some of them, are very dedicated and very talented, over time a person can really be convinced, or at least think that it's not so terrible to think so, or it's reasonable to assume such a thing. So that, yes, this is a problem. We see this all over the place. How else do you explain, for example, something which I saw recently? There is a certain midrasha for young women in Yerushalayim, known as Midrashet or Bichleret Lindenbaum. And I happened to recently see an interview with the person, the Rav, who is the head of this institution, has been for, I think, 20 odd years or more. And he was explaining, and he was very proud of this, that when we began our program for young religious women, that is, we're talking about 18-year-old, 19-year-old girls, who wanted to join the army in Israel, and we started a program for them to prepare them for the army, and then to maintain contact with them, etc., throughout their time in the army. We had two, I think he said 2 or 3 girls at the beginning, and now I don't remember the number now. I think something like 200 or something, and this has been going on for something like 2 decades. He spoke about thousands of young women who, through that program that he initiated, that he promoted. There are thousands of young women who have gone down that path. And he was extremely proud of this achievement, so to speak. And he said, when we began, it was a big discussion. There were many people against and opposed, and it wasn't acceptable. It wasn't Zelaya Makubal. And now, in his words, I'm quoting him, he said, "Achshav ze passé." Now it's old hat. It's all, everyone accepts it. Everyone thinks it's fine and normal, wonderful. It's a tremendous achievement. So where did this particular individual, a rabbi, where did he get the idea that this is such a, not only mutar, which is something that no no serious, notable Talmid Chachamim, Ba'al Halacha, has ever expressed such a view, to the best of my knowledge. The one or two people that I could mention do not fit that description. So where did he get the idea that such a view, such a philosophy, and not just thinking certain things, but acting on it, and actively promoting the idea that young women should go to the army, which, by the way, goes without saying that the moment any person, man, a girl or boy, goes to the army at a young age, which is still a very impressionable age usually, it goes without saying, everyone understands that this is the case. The army is not a bastion of Torah. It is a very secular organization. It has become much more so over the last 30-odd years, something which has been documented and presented very clearly in a book by an Israeli right-wing journalist by the name of Naved Daromi. The name of her book is Prahim Bakane, literally flowers in the barrel of the rifle, which explaining how what we call today, the term didn't even exist way back then when these things began, but the woke radical so-called progressives, which of course is a euphemism for the opposite, for regression and disaster, how these people have infiltrated the army on every level. Just a day or two ago, it was on the news that in one of the famous technological intelligence related units in the army, known as Yechidat 8200, the soldiers were required to attend what was supposed to be, what was advertised as a lecture speaking about sexual harassment within the army and how this will not be tolerated. It goes without saying, of course, if you don't have young men and young women whose hormones are at peak levels working together, then you're not going to have sexual harassment. But no one mentioned that, apparently. It was supposedly to be, it was advertised, it was said to be a discussion about that, but in fact there was a brief discussion of that, and then a much, much longer lecture by someone else describing how they had come out of the closet and had and so what's called coming out of the closet, and freely openly announcing their whatever sexual preference or inclination that they happen to believe in today. It might be different, of course, next week. One doesn't know. That was the lion's share of the evening, and they were required to attend. Okay, this was, of course, later denied by certain higher ups in the army, but those are the facts. It goes without saying that if you send young people to such an organization, this is a step. This is a decision which is fraught with danger, spiritual danger. Only a total fool could not see this. So how is it possible that a so-called rabbi decides that he has to dedicate 2 or more decades to this idea of making this something normal and acceptable? Was it based on Torah thinking? Was it based on by a process of osmosis, accepting all kinds of ideas about feminism, that whatever men can do, women can do and should do, and if secular Israeli girls go to the army, then obviously this, by definition, proves and implies and proves and requires that religious girls do the same thing, because how can it be that a secular girl does something a religious girl does not do? Once upon a time in Israel, it was, which is also very dubious and questionable, but it was the norm in the Zionist religious world in Israel that young women did Shirut Leumi, literally national service. They did not go to the army. I'm not saying it's a great idea either, but it's not as bad as going to the army. This was something that was, people were proud of this, that these girls were doing Shirut Leumi. It was not considered in some way insufficient, or it was not a problem that secular girls are doing something different, because religious people understood, or at least the Rabbanim understood, and they were able to convince most of the religious communities that they should follow this and accept this position, that religious girls don't belong in such a situation where there will be a constant interaction with secular people, B, with people of the opposite sex, etc., etc. But over time, that became an old-fashioned and benighted attitude. Obviously, we must do whatever the secular Jews do. So if they do this, we must do that. If their daughter goes to the army, my daughter has to go to the army. Let me also mention in passing that you will probably not be shocked to hear that this particular rabbi in question does not sport a beard. Why is that? Any particular reason, do you think? Did he learn from Jewish sources that that is a proper way to behave, to appear? Or is this again part of that process of becoming a mishumad, following, copying, emulating that which is done by others with whom you're rubbing shoulders? I'll leave you to figure that out for yourself. Now that I think about it for a moment, there's almost no Rabbanim, so-called or not so-called, who support such a position. But another one who comes to my mind is also beardless. Is this surprising? No, it's not surprising in the least, because it's all part of the pattern. It's all part of this anthropological, social reality of people not being able to define for themselves who they are and live by that, but rather allowing themselves to be manipulated and influenced and thus to adopt other opinions, other views. This is just one example.
Rabbi, we also see this in the judicial sphere.
Yes, we do. Of course we do. These people know, and they are correct, almost without exception, that if they do not become such so-called meshumadim, if they do not accept all kinds of ideas and assumptions, they will not be promoted. They will not receive a higher position. They will not be considered for a higher court or what have you. We see this all the time, and we see it, of course, now. Much of what is being discussed right now in Israel with regards to judicial reform. What will be at the end of the day, we do not know. We shall wait and see. But the very discussion amongst the leftists, the so-called progressives, etc., is if you know who these people are, then it's no longer really surprising. But the fact that there are also certain religious people who are very outspoken and adopt these views show to what extent they have been brainwashed, so that which is the norm in all so-called democratic countries, that judges are selected and confirmed by elected representatives of the public. This is how it is in all countries that you might think of, whether it's New Zealand or United States or France or Finland. But somehow, if someone suggests that that should also be the case in Israel, that is literally, quite literally, the beginning of the descent into fascist Nazism. These are the words used by these people. And again, some of them are rabbis, so-called. How did this happen? Where do these ideas come from? The real answer is we're talking about a religion. These ideas, these philosophies, these attitudes are part of a philosophical religious reality. And it's possible, unfortunately, to maintain a certain kind of religious lifestyle in many areas, but within, in one's mind and one's heart, to be completely off the derech. In other words, to think and view things through a pair of spectacles that are anything but Torah spectacles. Such a thing is possible, and it's becoming increasingly possible. And we see this all the time. So you can, we've discussed here people in the academic world, in the judicial world, but you can also see it on a much simpler, more commonplace level in Israeli society. I myself can tell you about people that I know, young people. In one case I'm thinking of is a young woman who, today she's in her early 30s, shall we say. She came from a non-religious background. She was Hazeret B'T Shuvah of her own volition at an early age, I think 16 or 17 or something like that. And she was very proud of her new religious identity. And she was, at that time, she was very, she dressed according to halakha, long sleeves, she covered her hair, etc. When she got married, she married a young man from a religious background. But he also, over time, became much less committed, shall we say, to the Torah. There's a fairly lukewarm attitude, shall we say, and that's number one, which that has an impact on the wife as well. If the husband is less Torah oriented, this will rub off on the wife very likely as well. Even more telling is that I know some of her social contacts in her family and what have you, in-laws, when she sees that her sisters-in-law, who once covered their hair, no longer cover their hair because it's becoming increasingly, to quote that great halachic authority, passé. If she sees that her sisters-in-law, who are also once more religious, covered their hair, today do not do so, well, at some point she's going to break. Why should she be the odd woman out? Why should she be what they call in Hebrew the dos? Why should be the which is a terrible term, I think, but that's how it's described. The person who is openly and unashamedly religious is referred to as a dos. So why should she be so? Why should she be, as it were, backward and less forward thinking than her peers? So these kinds of influences are everywhere, and you can see it everywhere you go, unfortunately. So, and all of this therefore lends extra weight and gravity and importance to what we are learning here in the Rambam. So to return to the Rambam, you should be able to see the Hilchot Deot, Perek Shishi, correct? Rambam says, and this is now halacha. Halacha Beth, from continuation of Aleph. V'chen im haya b'medina shemin ha'rotheh ha'ra'im. If a person lives in a city, literally, the word Medina means a large city, as the term is used in the Tanakh, for example, in the Mugillat Esther, and in Chazal, in Machon Shilo, Medina is a large city, usually a walled city. Im haya b'medina shemin ha'rotheh ha'ra'im. If a person lives in an area where the accepted norms are bad, are wrong, and the people, most of the people that do not live according to the Torah, and literally they do not walk along the straight path, he should move to a place where people do live and do act in that way, in the walk in the literally the path of the ways of the good and the righteous. And if all the places with which he is familiar, that he has heard about, if they all act in negative ways, in the norms and the standards that there should exist, simply do not exist. Says Rambam, as it is today. This is Rambam writing 850 odd years ago, a bit more. I allow you to exercise your imaginations what Rambam would say if he was referring to the present time and place. So Rambam says, as things are today in my time, so either if all the places that are available with which he is familiar, that he has heard about, are such, or he cannot go to a place that he knows of, which is better, but he cannot get there. Because literally of the armies, the military activities. In other words, travel is not possible. Free and safe travel is not possible. Or it's not possible to get there for reasons of illness. This is dangerous to travel there. It would involve a dangerous voyage or something like that. Yeshev levado yehidi. It is correct and proper that he choose to live pretty much almost completely as a hermit. Yeshev levado yehidi. He should live alone, separate himself, rather than be part of the chevra, be part of the crowd. Ka'inyan shene'emar, as it says, Yeshev badad v'idom, should sit alone silently. Ve'im hayu ra'im v'hatta'im, and if the people are such, the surroundings, the neighbors, the society around him are evil and sinful, she'en manihim otho leshev b'madina, such that he is not even able to be there, to remain there. Unless he adopts their positions and their views. He should rather go and live in a cave, or in the desert, rather than conduct himself and allow himself to live and be influenced by and walk in the paths and the ways of the sinful. In other words, I would be happy to be alone in the desert rather than among such people. So says Yirmiyahu. As it says in the Pasuk over there, it's worth looking at the Pasuk, I think. This is in Yirmiyahu, Perek Taif. Mi itaneni v'midbar melon orahim wa'azzava'ath ami wa'elecha me'itam. Halavai, I could leave my people and go turn away from them. Ki chulam mena'afim, they are all literally adulterers. Aseret bovadim, a convocation of evildoers, people who are not reliable, not trustworthy. And they, as a matter of habit, they lie. They do not promote honesty, trustworthiness. They go from one evil to the next. And they do not know me, they do not wish to know me, says Hashem. Ish mira'ehu hishameru, and therefore a person should be very wary of his fellow man. Wa'al kol al tiftahu, and do not rely on even on your brother. Ki chol aqov ya'akov v'chol re'a rachil yahaloch. People cannot be trusted, and people are living in another reality. وإيش برعه يهثلوا وأماثل يذبروا. They do not speak the truth. لمذول شنام دبر شكر عوا نلؤ. شفتخا بثوخ مرما. You are dwelling within a lie. بمرما مأنو ضعف وفي نمذناي. And part of this lie is refusing to hear and to know what the Torah states. So you see, these things are not new, unfortunately. Although it is true that in many ways the situation today around the world is, in Israel as well, of course, is in many ways more troubling and more degenerate than one could even imagine in former times. So these things must be taken to heart. And I think we will stop here for today. Not the easiest and most light-hearted things have we read here and learned here and discussed.
Rabbi?
But they are necessary. It's important that we take note and take stock of where we are, what goes on, and learn from the mistakes of others as well. Yes, you were saying.
It seems like part of what, as you were reading Yirmiyahu, I was thinking to myself, what makes this so apt is just the extreme deterioration of Western civilization, and the reality that has created for the Jewish people as well. Because, as you were saying, it's a religion, and it's a philosophical religious question, and that now the challenge isn't whether a Jew will be loyal to Judaism or Christianity. It's whether a Jew will be loyal to Judaism or to this Western concoction.
Yes, that is entirely true. There is no question that the Western world is in rapid free fall. Wherever you look, this is apparent. And the only question really is whether a person views life, reality, the world, history, and everything else based on a position, a philosophy, an ideology based on Hashem awareness, being aware or even for a non-Jew, being aware of God, being aware of a creator, and understanding there is a basic moral code, or whether man has simply shunted Hashem aside, and the highest authority is man himself, and not just man, but unbridled, unrestrained, unschooled, and completely out of control man that is beyond any type of moral, cultural norm. These things have happened before in human history. This is how the Greek Empire deteriorated and collapsed. This happened amongst the Persians. It happened amongst the Romans, and today it's happening in the current iteration of and the central powers in the Western world. And we have to protect ourselves to the utmost from the fallout and from the insanity.
Interestingly, Rob,
there is only one way of doing that, and that is total commitment to the Torah. Yes.
Interestingly, now that the West has gone to such a nadir, Hashem seems to have taken, raised the threat level coming from other actors in the world, such as Putin, who perhaps will provide an answer that will involve great tragedy, perhaps.
It's interesting that you mentioned Putin. Obviously, the man is no Sadiq, far from it. But he does have a saving grace. And that is that he and the vast majority of the Russian people, again, not my cup of tea, the Russian people as a rule, but their culture, their standards, etc., not something I'm really drawn to at all, but with a few exceptions. Perhaps a piece of music here or there by Tchaikovsky is quite all right, but also a couple of important works of literature one could mention, but we won't go into that right now. We don't really need to spend too much time on Russian literature to learn about morals. We have a few of our own sources on the subject. The majority of the Russians want no part of the current Western international globalist culture. They reject it out of hand, and rightly so. And in other words, there is a certain basic fundamental health and normalcy about them still. And Putin is not, and many of the people who work with him, etc., they're all crooks, that goes without saying. But I just heard the other day from reliable sources. Of course, the main thing to know in this world is if you're going to try and hear or see anything, any kind of media, you have to know what to choose, where to get any information from. So apparently the current Russian defense minister Shoigu, something like a quarter of the defense budget, he and his cronies simply ferret away and steal, and another quarter goes to something else, pay off other people. So half of the budget exists in reality. So if you're wondering why the Russians aren't doing too well right now in Ukraine, that's part of the answer. And this is normal for all these people. So Putin and his cronies, they're all criminals in that sense, but at least they're not totally degenerate in every possible sense. And that is something which we can and should take note of. The same is true, by the way, of the current prime minister for many years now in Hungary, Orban, and the same is true in Poland, as I understand it. when there was pressure from certain quarters inside and outside Hungary to make the current Western gender insanity part of the curriculum or something like that. He and other people around the country were very opposed in Hungary, and they some time ago, I don't remember exactly when this was, they actually conducted a referendum on the subject. 92% of the Hungarians voted against it. It's an amazing figure, first of all. You don't usually hear about 92% of people voting for anything at all. Even if you were to ask people to vote, is it right now day or night, you wouldn't probably get that. You wouldn't get that kind of turnout. They also had a huge turnout, and they also had a massive vote against these ideas, which shows again that there are nations, there are people who are willing to say, we are not interested in going down this path. I recently heard an advisor to this Prime Minister Orban, who, unlike most Hungarians, speaks a very good English. He was explaining in simple terms, we are a nation with a 1,000-year history. Our history, our traditions, our culture is all based on Christianity and other traditions, etc. And this is our identity. This is who we are. This is whom we wish to remain. We do not wish to see everything that was associated with the term Hungary or Hungarian language or culture, history, simply dissolve and be washed away by this tidal wave of degenerate insanity from the West. So if that's what other people want to do, that's fine, but don't try to impose it on us. It goes without saying that the Jewish people have a certain head start on the Hungarians. We haven't got a 1,000-year history. We have a 4,000-year history, and we have our traditions, from which traditions most of the rest of the world decided to borrow or learn. And we also, obviously, not because they're doing it, but certainly we for those who have any doubt on the matter, we should be able to tell ourselves, if they can do it, we can do it as well. We can stand up and say, we are different and we don't want to be like you people. And the real split within Jewish society in Israel today, and around the world, by the way, is along these lines. Do we wish to be part of the current ideologies and lifestyles that are bringing about the collapse of the Western world? And it seems that the collapse is inevitable on many levels and for many reasons. And that's probably, in some ways, a good thing, as long as we know how to remain afloat. If we know how to save ourselves when the Titanic goes down, not to be sucked down with it. And that, again, depends entirely on one thing, and that is knowing who we are and remaining committed and loyal to ourselves, to our history, to our traditions, to the Torah, to Hashem. Heyu beruchim, hizku v'emes levavchem, kol ha'meyahalim levalai.
Thank you, Rabbi Bar-Hayim. We would like to encourage our viewers to share these videos with friends and send in your responses. We would also like to suggest the following opportunity to our viewers. If you identify with Rabbi Bar-Hayim's message and would like to sponsor or dedicate a video interview with the rabbi in honor or memory of a loved one, if you would like to obtain Birkon Nusach Eretz Yisrael or invite the rabbi for a speaking engagement, please email us at office@machonshilo.org.